Good morning, all of you. Are you able to hear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So from today onwards, we will start abdomen. So today I'm going to discuss now anterior abdominal wall. So abdomen, it is a part of trunk below the diaphragm. So normally, please all of you mute your voice. So it is a part of trunk below the diaphragm. In the abdomen, it contains a cavity which is subdivided by a plane of pelvic inlet into two parts. So upper part is called as abdomen proper and lower part is called as pelvic cavity. So abdominal cavity is divided into two parts, that is abdomen proper and pelvic cavity. So normally abdominal cavity contains blood vessels, lymphatics, nerves, and also two hollow muscular tubular system, that is GAT, along with the accessory glands, that is liver, pancreas, and the urogenital system. So coming to the boundaries of abdomen. So here abdomen is bounded by, it consists of roof and a floor and anterior wall and posterior wall. So roof is formed by undersurface of diaphragm. So then floor is formed by anteriorly by urogenital diaphragm and posteriorly by pelvic diaphragm. These urogenital and pelvic diaphragm supports the genital organs. Okay. So coming to the anterior wall. So anterior wall, it is firm and elastic. So it is formed by a three flat muscles with muscle and its aponeurosis. And also in the middle, it is strengthened by rectus abdominis. And posterior wall, it is very rigid compared to the anterior wall. It is a osteomusculofacial. So it consists of a roof, a floor, anterior wall, and posterior wall. So these are the boundaries of abdomen. So coming to the anterior abdominal wall. So anterior abdominal wall, so it consists of boundaries. You can see the diagram. So this is the xiphisternum and the, so this is xiphisternum, and then these are the costal cartilages. Above xiphisternum and the right and left costal margins. So above that violet color represents the boundaries. So you can see here the xiphisternum and right and left costal margins. And below by the anterior part of iliac crest, then groin. Then this one is the pubic symphysis and pubic crest. On each side, it is bounded by mid-axillary line. So these are the boundaries of anterior abdominal wall. So above by the xiphisternum and the right and left costal margins, and below by the iliac crest and the groin and the pubic symphysis. So on each side by the mid-axillary line. So coming to the layers of anterior abdominal wall. So come from before and before backwards, that is skin, superficial fascia, external oblique muscle and its aponeurosis, internal oblique muscle and its aponeurosis, transverse abdominis and its aponeurosis, fascia transversalis, extraperitoneal tissue, and parietal peritoneum. So these are all layers of the anterior abdominal walls. So skin, superficial fascia, external oblique and its aponeurosis, internal oblique and aponeurosis, transverse abdominis, and fascia transversalis, extraperitoneal tissue, and parietal peritoneum. So coming to the each layer, So skin consists of, it is very thin compared to the posterior abdominal wall. It consists of median furrow. So it is consist of a median furrow, okay, and then there are the lateral curved lines. So this central furrow, this is the median furrow. It corresponds with the linea alba, and these are the lateral, which will correspond to the linea semilunaris and the lateral border of the rectus abdominis, and then a surface depression called umbilicus. And also there are the cleavage lines are present in the abdomen. So those are horizontal lines. Normally, all of you know, in the lower limbs, the cleavage lines are in vertical direction. But here in the abdomen, these are in horizontal direction. So I think all of you know the importance of cleavage lines. So whenever there is a surgical incision along with these lines, it will give a thin scar. That is the importance of Langer's lines. And also this abdomen, and that means skin, it is capable of undue stretching because of fat, fetus, flatulence, fecus, and the fluid. So skin of the anterior abdominal wall, it is very thin and sensitive. Then coming to the umbilicus. So umbilicus is a composed of cicatricial tissue which is formed by the remnant of fetal end of the umbilical cord. Normally, umbilical lies at the level of L3 and L4 vertebra in adult, but it is in lower level in infants and old age. Coming to the superficial fascia, above the line joining the two anterior superior iliac spines, it consists of single layer. So below the line, this superficial fascia consists of two layers. So a line joining the anterior superior iliac spine, two anterior superior iliac spines. So that is, you can see in the diagram. So this is anterior superior iliac spine. So the line joining the two anterior superior iliac spine. So above this level, the superficial fascia consists of only single layer. So below this fascia, this consists of two layers. So superficial layer is called as fascia of Camper or superficial fatty layer. And second layer or deep layer is called as deep membranous layer or fascia scarpa. So this is about the superficial fascia. So this fatty layer, so all of you know the fatty layer, it is continuous with the subcutaneous fat of adjoining areas like lower limb and then thorax. So it is continuous with the fatty layer. But over the scrotum, it is replaced by dartos muscle. So that is about the fatty layer. Then coming to the membranous layer. So it is also called as fascia scarpa. So it is an elastic fibrous tissue which is in the midline, it is attached to the linea alba and it is continued in front of pubic symphysis as fundiform ligament of penis. Over the pubic crest, it is continuous with the dartos, fascia collis of perineum, and over the inguinal ligament, it blends with the fascia lata at Holden's line. So it is merges with the fascia lata. So all of you know the fascia lata, which is a deep fascia of thigh. So it blends with the fascia lata at Holden's line. So Holden's line is just below the inguinal ligament. So at the Holden's line, this membranous layer is fuses with the fascia lata. So that is about the membranous layer. Okay. So fascia scarpa in front of pubic symphysis continue as the fundiform ligament of penis. Over the pubic crest, it is continuous with dartos and also it continues with the perineum. Okay, I will show you in the diagram. So you can see here the yellow color represents the campus fascia or superficial fatty layer. Then blue color, that is the scarpa fascia. Then fascia lata. So this is a line of fusion that is called as Holden's line, where the membranous layer is attached to the fascia lata or deep fascia of thigh. Then it also continues with the fascia collis, that is the perineum. Okay, so it is continuous with the fascia of collis, that is superficial fascia of perineum, is called as fascia collis. So that is the continuation of the membranous layer. So this is the two layers of the superficial fascia. Then coming to the contents of superficial fascia. So there are cutaneous nerve. All of you know the superficial fascia consists of nerves, vessels. So what are the cutaneous nerves are present in the superficial fascia? Those are the lower 6 thoracic nerves and the first lumbar nerve. And then cutaneous arteries, that is anterior lateral cutaneous arteries, and superficial epigastric, superficial external pudendal, and superficial circumflex celiac artery. I think all of you know, so these superficial branches are branches of femoral artery. Then coming to the cutaneous veins. So it also accompanies the arteries, same names. Then superficial lymphatics. So above the umbilicus, it drains into axillary lymph nodes. Below the umbilicus, it drains into superficial inguinal lymph node. So umbilicus acts as a watershed line. So that is about the superficial fascia. So coming to the other layer, so the deep fascia. Normally below the superficial fascia, there is a deep fascia. But in the abdomen, the deep fascia is absent. And also one more area where the deep fascia is absent, that it is face. So deep fascia is absent here because normally the deep fascia is formed by the collagenous fibrous membrane, so which is non-elastic. So it might prevent bulging of anterior abdominal wall. That's why there is no deep fascia in the abdomen also. So you have to remember, so the deep fascia is absent in face and the anterior abdominal wall. Then coming to the muscles of the abdominal wall. So at the anterolateral part of abdomen, so there are three muscles: external oblique muscle, internal oblique muscle, and transverse abdominis muscle. So these are present anteriorly and also lateral part. In the anterior midline, there is one more muscle that is called as a rectus abdominis. So today I am discussing only about the anterolateral muscles, that is external oblique, internal oblique, and transverse abdominis. In the next class, they will deal with the rectus abdominis. So coming to the external oblique. So any muscle, so it has got an origin, insertion, nerve supply, and action. So here external oblique muscle takes origin from the, it takes origin as 8 fleshy slits from the lower 8 ribs, that is outer and the outer surface and lower border of lower 8 ribs. So these are origins of the so you can see here these are the lower ribs, okay, lower 8 ribs taking origin. Then coming to the insertion. So insertion, the most posterior fibers will insert onto the iliac crest. So this is the iliac crest. You can see in the diagram. So this is the iliac crest. So posterior fibers will insert onto the iliac crest, and the anterior fibers, that is all the remaining fibers, will form the aponeurosis. So this is the aponeurosis. So this aponeurosis extends from the xiphisternum So this is xiphoid process, then continuous downwards as linea alba up to the pubic symphysis. Then continuous with the pubic crest and pectineal line of pubis. So this is the attachment of the aponeurosis. So from the xiphoid process, linea alba, pubic symphysis, all of you know the pubic symphysis, which is a joint between the two hip bones. So this is the pubic crest and the pectineal line of pubis. Then coming to the special features about external oblique abdominis. So all of you know that origin of serratus anterior. So here, the external oblique muscle, the first 4 slips of external obliques interdigitate with the serratus anterior. Because serratus anterior also taking origin from the outer rib. So it will interdigitate with the serratus anterior, first 4 slips, and lower 4 slips interdigitate with the latissimus dorsi. Then coming to the, so between the linea alba and linea semilunaris, this aponeurosis will form the anterior wall of rectus sheath. So this is the rectus sheath. So here it is forming the anterior wall of rectus sheath. Normally the rectus sheath is formed by all the external, internal and the transverse abdominis muscles. So external oblique will form anterior wall of rectus sheath. And also between the anterior superior iliac spine and pubic tubercle, this lower free margin of the external oblique will form the inguinal ligament. So between the anterior superior iliac spine and this is the anterior superior iliac spine and this is pubic tubercle. So in between the anterior superior iliac spine and pubic tubercle, the lower free margin of external oblique aponeurosis folds on itself to form the inguinal ligament. So what is the attachment of inguinal ligament? So that is from the anterior superior iliac spine to pubic tubercle. So inguinal ligament is also called as Poppert's ligament. And above the pubic crest, so this is the pubic tubercle and this is pubic symphysis. Okay, so this one is the pubic tubercle. Then this is pubic tubercle and then this is the pubic symphysis. In between, this part is called as pubic crest. So above the pubic crest, it presents a triangular aperture. So this is the aperture called superficial inguinal ring. So external oblique will form the inguinal ligament and also the deficiency in the external oblique aponeurosis will form the superficial inguinal ring. So these are special features of the external oblique muscle. So it will form the anterior wall of rectus sheath, inguinal ligament, and then also superficial inguinal ring. Here you can see the external oblique muscle. So this is the external oblique muscle. So here the first 4 slips are interdigitating with serratus anterior and the lower 4 slips with the latissimus dorsi, and also it will form the anterior wall of rectus sheath. So these fibers are taking origin from the ribs. So the direction of fibers are downwards, forwards and medially. So these are the external oblique fibers. You can see with the arrow mark. So this is the dissected specimen. So you can see the external oblique, the direction of fibers. Then coming to the internal oblique. Internal oblique takes origin from the lateral 2/3 of inguinal ligament. This is the lateral 2/3 of inguinal ligament. Lateral 2/3 of inguinal ligament and intermediate area of iliac crest, then in the back with the thoracolumbar fascia. So it takes origin continuously from the lateral 2/3 of inguinal ligament. So inguinal ligament is attached to the anterior superior iliac spine to pubic tubercle. So at the lateral end of inguinal ligament, it is continuous with the iliac crest. So intermediate area of iliac crest, then thoracolumbar fascia. So which is present on the posterior part. So it takes origin from the thoracolumbar fascia. Coming to the insertion. So the muscle fibers which are taking origin from the inguinal region, that is from the inguinal ligament. So these fibers will passes medially and downwards and will form the conjoint tendon. So only inguinal fibers will form the conjoint tendon along with the transverse abdominis muscle, which will get inserted onto pubic crest and the pecten pubis. Pubic crest and the pecten pubis. Those are only inguinal fibers. Then coming to the posterior fibers, that is the posterior fibers will insert onto the lower 3 or 4 ribs. So posterior fibers to the lower 3 or 4 ribs and their costal cartilage. The remaining all fibers which are coming from the iliac crest will form the aponeurosis. So this will form the aponeurosis. All the remaining fibers will form the aponeurosis and it is attached to the linea alba. So here at the lateral border of rectus abdominis, this aponeurosis splits into anterior and posterior layers. So from here, it splits into anterior and posterior layer to enclose the rectus abdominis muscle and then get inserted onto the linea alba. So this aponeurosis extends from the costal margin to midway between this, here is the umbilicus. So midway between the umbilicus and pubic symphysis. So up to this, there will be a splitting of aponeurosis. So here you have to remember the inguinal fibers. Inguinal fibers are inserted as a conjoint tendon along with the transverse abdominis muscle. So it is inserted onto pubic crest and the pecten pubis. Posterior fibers to the lower 3 or 4 ribs and their costal cartilages, and remaining fibers to the linea alba as forming the anterior and posterior layer of pectus sheath. So this is the insertion of the internal oblique. Coming to the special features of internal oblique muscle. So here also, so external oblique also forming the rectus sheath and the internal oblique is also forming a rectus sheath. And also conjoint tendon. So conjoint tendon is formed by internal oblique and also transverse abdominis. And one more muscle, small muscle, which consists of series of irregular U-shaped loops, which is a irregular U-shaped loops, that is called as a cremaster muscle. So this small muscle is also formed by the internal oblique. That is the cremaster muscle. So you can see with the arrow mark. So that is the internal oblique abdominis. So the fibers are going upward, medially and forwards. So these are the fibers of the internal oblique muscle. So here in the first diagram, there will be a reflected portion of that is the cut end of the external oblique. So below that, this is the internal oblique. Then coming to the transverse abdominis. So transverse abdominis also takes, why it is called as transverse abdominis? Because the fibers are transverse in direction. That's why it is called as a transverse abdominis. So the origin of transverse abdominis, it arises from the lateral 1/3 of inguinal ligament. Okay, lateral 1/3 of inguinal ligament, then inner lip of iliac crest, anterior 2/3 of iliac crest, same as in internal abdominis. So iliac crest, then thoracolumbar fascia, and inner surface of lower 6 ribs and also costal cartilages. Internal oblique inserted onto the lower ribs and costal cartilage, but here transverse abdominis taking origin from the ribs and the costal cartilage. So here this is the total origin. Coming to the insertion, so the inguinal fibers, same like internal oblique. So the inguinal fibers will form the conjoint tendon, which will attaches to the pecten pubis here. And the remaining fibers, all fibers will form the aponeurosis. So aponeurosis is extended from the xiphoid process to the linea alba. So this is about the transverse subdominis. So conjoint tendon is formed by internal oblique and transverse subdominis. Here you can see the conjoint tendon. So above one is the external oblique muscle. Then this is the internal oblique and this is the transverse subdominis. These two together will form the conjoint tendon. You can see with the arrow, this is the transverse subdominis. So the direction of muscle fibers are transverse. Coming to the nerve supply. So the nerve supply to the external oblique is supplied by the ventral rami of lower 6th thoracic nerve. And internal oblique and transverse subdominis is supplied by ventral rami of lower 6th thoracic nerves and first lumbar nerve. Coming to the actions of abdominal muscles. So common actions for all these muscles. First is the retention. So this will retain the viscera in position. By the tone of muscles, it will retain the viscera in position. And the second one is the protection. So it will protect the internal organs from the external injury. And third one is the compression. Whenever there is a vomiting, okay, so there will be increased intra-abdominal pressure to avoid the urine or during micturition, defecation. So this action is helpful. That is the compression. That is increase in the intra-abdominal pressure. And coming to the actions on vertebral column. So these all muscles, abdominal muscles, will cause the flexion, lateral flexion and rotation of the trunk by acting on the vertebral column. So muscles of both sides contract. If the muscles of both sides will contract, it will cause the flexion of vertebral column. If the unilateral muscles, okay, one side of muscles will contract, it will cause the lateral flexion. If the external oblique of one side contracts simultaneously with the opposite internal oblique contraction, will cause the rotation of the trunk. So total trunk movements are by the abdominal muscles. So if the both muscles contract, it will cause the flexion. If the unilateral muscles will contract, lateral flexion. If the one side of external oblique along with the other side of internal oblique will form the rotation of the trunk. Coming to the next layer, that is fascia transversalis. So the fascia transversalis is the fascia covering the inner side of the transverse subdominis. So this fascia transversalis, in front it is attached to the linea alba, behind it is continuous with the renal fascia above the kidney, above it is continuous with the subdiaphragmatic fascia, below is well defined, and the attachments of lower part is to the inner lip of iliac crest, posterior margin of inguinal ligament, pectin pubis and pubic crest. So inferiorly it is attached to the bony prominences. So in front it is attached to the linea alba, behind it is continuous with the renal fascia, above the subdiaphragmatic fascia, below it is attached to the bones. So this is the fascia transversalis. So that is inner side of the transverse abdominis muscle. It is called as a endo-abdominal muscle, endo-abdominal fascia. So specialties of fascia transversalis. All of you know the anterior wall of femoral sheath is formed by fascia transversalis. So this is nothing but this fascia transversalis. It will form the anterior wall of femoral sheath and also iliopubic tract. And the deficiency in the fascia transversalis will form the deep inguinal ring above the mid-inguinal point. So there is one more there is superficial inguinal ring which is formed in the external oblique aponeurosis. One more is the deep inguinal ring which is formed in the fascia transversalis. This is the deficiency in the fascia transversalis, which is situated above the mid-inguinal point. And also fascia transversalis will form the internal spermatic fascia. Coming to the extraperitoneal connective tissue. So extraperitoneal connective tissue, it is a fibroareolar fatty tissue. Normally this connective tissue means it is traversed by the arteries. So here it is traversed by inferior epigastric artery, obliterated umbilical artery, median umbilical ligament. And coming to the last layer, that is the parietal peritoneum. So below the umbilicus, it presents 5 folds. So you can see this is the diagram. So this is the diagram you can see here. So this is the median umbilical fold, which is present in the midline. Median umbilical fold, which extends from the apex of, this is bladder, apex of bladder to the umbilicus. This is median umbilical fold. So which consists of median umbilical ligament. So median umbilical fold consists of median umbilical ligament. Then second one, there are the pair of medial umbilical folds. So this is the medial umbilical fold. So medial umbilical fold consists of obliterated umbilical artery. And then there is a lateral umbilical fold. So this is the lateral umbilical fold. So which consists of inferior epigastric artery. So this is the parietal peritoneum. So right side, there is a parietal peritoneum. So here it is reflected. So here it is reflected. You can see with the arteries, that is inferior epigastric arteries. And also in between these folds, there are the fossas. So here in between the median and medial, there is a supravesical fossa. You can see with the green rings. So the first one is the supravesical fossa. Then second one is the medial inguinal fossa. That is between the medial and lateral umbilical fold. Then lateral to the lateral umbilical fold, there is one more fossa that is called as a lateral inguinal fossa. So these are the fossas which are present in the parietal peritoneum. So these are the 5 folds which will form by the parietal peritoneum. That is median umbilical fold, medial umbilical fold, and lateral umbilical fold. So you can see in the dissected specimen. So here the lateral margins of the anterior abdominal wall is cut and it is opened inferiorly. So you can see this is the pelvic cavity. So this is bladder. So you can imagine this one is the median umbilical fold, and then this one is the, that is 14 number, that is the which fold? Medial umbilical fold. Then 13 is the lateral umbilical fold. So these are the 3 folds. Okay. So you can see here the inferior epigastric artery which is present in the lateral umbilical fold. So these are the layers of the abdomen. So all of you know now. So there are 8 layers. So the first layer is the skin, superficial fascia, then external oblique muscle and its aponeurosis, internal oblique and muscle and its aponeurosis, then transverse abdominis muscle and its aponeurosis, fascia transversalis, extraperitoneal connective tissue, then again parietal peritoneum. So these are all the layers of anterior abdominal wall. And in the midline, it is strengthened by the rectus abdominis.